Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving straight into an incredibly atmospheric mythic fable today called The Sage and the Inquisitor, a Genealogy of Silence. What is so fascinating about this source text is how it takes these heavy themes, like existential dread and nihilism, and totally flips them on their head. Instead of presenting these ideas as bleak, this narrative explores how biblical philosophy and ancient lament might actually serve as a deeply comforting cure for our modern burnout. It's an amazing journey from ancient tears to modern clinical detachment, so let's get right into it.
Right out of the gate, our source throws us into a really tense interrogation. Picture a cold room. On one side, you have the cynical inquisitor, a figure in a torn cassock who represents this old, suspicious faith. On the other side is the dark sage, the quiet subject of his investigation. Now, the inquisitor is genuinely conflicted here. He hunted this sage down expecting to find a dangerous heretic, but instead, he's totally disarmed by what he reads in the sage's file. He literally confesses he doesn't know whether to burn him or to thank him.
Chapter 1. The Inquisitor's Entrance. 3 faces, 1 skull.
So, the Inquisitor has been tracking the same philosophical heretic across wildly different eras of history. First, in ancient Jerusalem, the sage wept and called the world a vapor. Then, we jump to the 19th century, where he's pacing his cell in Copenhagen, a clear nod to early existentialists, and calling the world dread. Finally, in the 20th century, he's just watching silently from nowhere in particular, calling the world nothing. It's one underlying truth, one skull wearing 3 distinct historical masks, evolving from ancient tears right down to modern silence. And the Inquisitor, he just wants to know which face is the truest.
Chapter 2. Koheleth's Ledger. The First Honest Census.
The sage begins by explaining his very first mask, known as Koheleth, or the preacher. Now, Koheleth doesn't weep out of emotional weakness, not at all. He weeps out of simple arithmetic. He has counted up the universe's promises, and the math just doesn't add up. He uses the Hebrew word hevel, meaning vapor or breath. It's this brilliant piece of ancient philology. It represents something you try to grasp, but when you close your hand around it, your palm is just completely empty, no matter how hard you squeeze. The source uses this to show how the world was calculated as vapor, a place where your human effort and the eventual outcome simply aren't bound together.
To really understand Koheleth's arithmetic, we just have to look at what he observed. He watched the wise man build a house, only for a fool to inherit it. He saw the just man starving while the tyrant was feasting. His conclusion? That neat, balanced ledger the priest promised, where good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished, it simply doesn't exist. Koheleth realized the wise man and the fool get the exact same fate. And here's the kicker. This isn't despair. It's just an honest, clear-eyed census of a totally unaudited world.
The absolutely crucial point here is that when Koheleth cries vanity, he isn't confessing a sin. It's a measurement. His face wears this strange, exhausted stillness. Why? Because he has finally, truly stopped expecting the cosmic scale to tip in his favor. He stops flinching at the world's silence because he finally understands the math.
Moving to Chapter 3. The Emptied Temple. Salting the Ground of Grief.
As the Inquisitor pushes the sage, we see how this ancient lament slowly hardened over the centuries. Back in the 12th century, humanity was still actively arguing with heaven, right? Demanding answers. By the 19th century, with the rise of existentialism, heaven had largely emptied out, so we started arguing with ourselves. But by the 20th century, we start arguing entirely. The sage's final mask just clinically catalogs the wreckage. It's this massive shift from a sacred, active grief, where you genuinely believe the wind might carry your complaint to God, to a flat, dry observation that no wind was ever listening in the first place.
And the Inquisitor realizes this is exactly why he is so deeply unsettled. You see, a heretic at least still argues with the altar. They still care enough to rebel. But the sage's modern face, it stops setting a place for the altar entirely. He's concluded that the office of cosmic judge was simply never filled.
Chapter 4. The Honest Solitude. The Daily Tax Paid to Hope.
So, you might be wondering, how does a human mind actually survive this total subtraction of all historical comfort? How can the sage possibly call this absolute emptiness peace? Well, it comes down to contrasting false hope with quiet acceptance. If you cling to false hope, the text argues, you're paying a cruel daily tax. It's a tiny lie you have to renew every single morning just to avoid facing Koheleth's closed ledger. But quiet acceptance? That is a debt paid once, in full. It might be cold, but once you pay it, you own your nights outright. Holding on to false hope is actually a way crueler daily drain. The isolated thinkers of history weren't cowards running away from society. Not at all. They were honest witnesses. They simply stopped bandaging a wound that false hope kept reopening. They stopped sending letters to an address the universe never even held. Now, the crowd might call that a wound, but the sage, he calls it stopping a cycle of self-inflicted pain.
Chapter 5. The Empty House. Applied. Transforming hopelessness into a solid floor.
Let's take this out of ancient Jerusalem and 19th century Copenhagen and apply this empty house concept directly to the stressors of our own everyday lives. Think about this phrase. A house found empty is a shock only to the tenant who expects an answer. That is the core transformation right there. The moment you stop calling out into the rooms of the universe expecting a reply, the silence completely changes. It transforms from a terrifying void into a solid floor. It becomes a quiet place where you can actually finally rest.
Think about how we apply this to the meanest Tuesday of an ordinary week. An unanswered email, a missed deadline, maybe nobody applauded your hard work. The exhausted man treats these completely normal disappointments as fresh, cosmic betrayals. It's like he thinks the universe signed a contract to reward him and just broke it. But the lucid man, he expects absolutely no contract from the universe, so nothing is broken. As the explainer lays out, modern burnout is often just a perceived failure of cosmic bookkeeping. True peace comes when you release yourself from a ledger the world was never obligated to keep.
Chapter 6. A Genealogy of Silence. For the student who comes after.
After hearing all this, the Inquisitor goes completely quiet. He drops his aggressive accusation entirely, realizing he's got absolutely nothing left to burn. He hasn't found a heresy, he's found a genealogy that needs to be understood. Koholeth began the ledger. The existentialist carried it to the trembling self, and the final mask quietly closed the book on the shelf. The Inquisitor realizes that nihilism, when properly read, isn't just some gloomy absence of philosophy. It's the terminus, the final stop of an incredibly honest one. It's a slow, honest unclothing of comforts that completely refuses any easy, fake exits.
And the Inquisitor notes that this is the lesson worth carrying forward. It's an audit of our own comfort. And it leads to this really stunning realization. The cold, once entered all the way, starts behaving like a room. What began as a terrifyingly cold, empty, and silent reality actually becomes a deeply comforting and protective shelter for the modern mind, if you're just brave enough to enter it completely.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to help you audit your own comfort. When you're facing the stressors and the burnout of your daily life, will you keep choosing the world's cheaper fires? Will you keep paying that exhausting daily tax to false hope? Or will you embrace the quiet, unbothered peace of the empty house and enter the cold room? It's a profound shift in perspective, and honestly, one that just might cure the exhaustion of expecting the universe to balance a ledger it never actually kept. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.